Being a founder is as exciting as it is daunting. And one of the biggest worries for founders is cash. When we think about funds, we think about VCs and the promise of being a unicorn. Yet, with the economic downturn and the constant changing landscape of startup funding, it's becoming clearer that the competition for VC cash is as fierce as ever. So how do you run a startup without VCs and scaling to Series A+? This is what we are going to explore in this special episode in collaboration with Leeds Digital Festival. Welcome to Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Naily Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and startup advisor, I will answer live the burning questions that you have on your journey to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. For those who are new to my show, and I believe thanks to Leeds Digital Festival, I've spread my wings even further. We do have one rule. Do come and connect and also share your own experiences with the audience. So if there's anything that we've said that resonates with you, then why not share that with others? And if, as we're talking about different tools or strategies, I know that there are many other experts listening right now as well. Thanks for that. And if you can share with the audience, please do feel free to do so. But before we start and really go deep into what we are going to cover, I wanted a quick reminder, and I always do that, especially when we start talking about funding and growing startups. There are no magic bullets. If anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying. There's no guarantees for success on anything, with VCs or without VCs. There's no easy path. If there were easy paths, I don't think there'll be as many startups struggling as there is now. No one size fits all, and that will apply to absolutely everybody. So pick from this talk what works for you, try it out, and make it your own. So what are we going to look at? First, we are going to look at unicorn versus zebra. And I really wanted to start this discussion by jumping into what bootstrapping really means and also appreciate the challenges that come with bootstrapping. I know it's been part of my own journey. Cash flow is king. Be lean and generate revenue. We're going to look at people on the workplace playground and how it impacts the growing startups. And of course, how to get VC to love you. As a reminder, if you have any questions at any moment, please put them in the chat. And with the help of the community, the audience, and myself, we'll be able to answer you live. So let's start as this idea of VCs. Before you kind of start having an idea of what I might like or not, let me put it out straight. I'm not pro VCs or against VCs or anything in between. I believe that going down the VC route is a fundamental way of raising finances, but it might also not apply to everybody, especially for early stage startups. There are other challenges and hoops that they need to go through before even getting to the level where being a VC or asking for VC money is relevant. There are a few myths that I hear a lot in startup communities, especially first-time founders, which I thought I will start by kind of debunking some of that. The first one is that VC funding guarantees success. That there is this impression that having VC on board really increases your chances of success, which could be true or not, but will definitely lead you to the promised land of unicorn. And according to Harvard Business Review, roughly 75% of venture-backed startups fail to return investors' capital. And in fact, if you look at other unicorn and large organizations out there, for example, Airbnb, they actually started bootstrapped and that strategy worked for them. Myth number 2, VCs invest in ideas. And I think this comes from a lot of Netflix series and movies where there's this idea of if you just write something on a beer mat, one sheet of paper, and you just go to the VC and you have a lot of charisma, you will wow them and get the money. Remember, no one size fits all. And in fact, one of the things that we are seeing today, because of the economic downturn and because of things like no code, which I'll talk about later, there is another expectation from VC to which kind of stages that they would love to see startups move forward. So it's worth bearing in mind that the more you have traction, the more you might become more attractive to VCs as well. Myth number 3, VCs provide mentorship. Now, this is something you need to be careful when you really want to start attracting VCs in your company. Do they provide mentorship or not? It's true that most VC might want to take a seat on the board, but it depends on whether they want to be active or passive. So it's always great to have a shopping list of exactly what you need and what kind of personalities that you want to have as a VC, not as people, so that you have a stronger board for you if you go down that line. And the last one, again, I've mentioned that already, but I wanted to emphasize that VC funding is the only path to unicorn status. It's not technically true because other companies, even if, I don't know if you know about MailChimp, a lot of people know that, but what you might not know is that they were also bootstrapped and they never raised VC funding. As I've said, VC is not just is not a bad option or a good option. It is an option out there, but I do encourage people to kind of look how to kind of hold off on that and think about different ways of running a startup. And why is that really important? And why did I decide that as part of the Leeds Digital Festival, I wanted to talk a little bit about that? Well, over the last few months and years, especially since the pandemic, I've seen with a lot of the startups that I work with, whether consultancy or I'm an advisor or whatever we are doing, that raising funds is becoming more and more difficult. And in fact, this has been echoed at other startup conference. I speak at Madrid, South Summit, Cornwall at the conference, and the message is the same. Because of everything that's happening, there is a push for having more traction. The more traction that you have and the more you can start generating revenue early, will become a bit more exciting or attractive to VCs. And in fact, it will lead to startups being able to negotiate their terms a little bit more than they would if you are just at a very, very early stage. And the second thing that's worth mentioning is no code. Now, no code is a blessing in disguise, but it comes with its own challenges. And one of them is the realization that startups can go a bit further than they could years before no code. So that is slowly becoming something that investors speak a lot, especially at big events, as it's something that they would love to see people being able to generate some income, whether they've used no code or other techniques. That is why I think it's really important to look at that framework or that mindset. Having said that, bootstrapping is not easy. I'm not even going to pretend and say, yes, go for that. That's the best way to go, without talking about some of the challenges. It requires having some cash reserve to start, requires having the mindset and the people around you to start executing early and create the right strategies to bring some revenues down on your side. It does give you more freedom with the company, depending on how you want to move. You are less linked to others. You might retain more equity, but there are also some of the challenges. And what I wanted to do in this episode is really to start looking at some of those challenges that startup founders have, especially first-time founders, and give you some tips and tricks that can help you to move forward. Before I move on and start talking about the biggest part, which is cash, let me remind you of 3 things that I've seen a lot as well when it comes to startups and bootstrapping. And I think that, again, some of those misconceptions needs to move or kind of lead way to better way of thinking. Bootstrapping doesn't mean not paying your employees or your collaborators. Cash is always a problem. And as a startup, you are going to go through these moments where you are not sure where the next paycheck will come, not just for you, because you're probably used to that, but also for the people you work with. And if that's the case, do remember how important it is to maintain relationship. And as we are going to start looking at how to find money, I really wanted to start with that aspect. And again, I believe in going into whatever ventures with your eyes open and knowing that some of the challenges will happen. So the way you create the line of communication with your employees, suppliers, and collaborators will really save you and maintain the relationship as you are moving forward. Bootstrapping doesn't mean doing everything yourself. And I've seen that a lot, where a lot of great ideas go to the graveyard without a chance of growing just because the founder was really into this, I will do it myself. There is a part where, especially at the early days, doing it yourself is required. But as you grow, you need to think about how much revenue do I need to attract so that I can delegate, so that I can also focus on growing the company. And I will also talk about other platforms that you can use to find people if you wanted to start growing your team. And of course, the last one, even if you are bootstrapping, you still need to think about the best way of building your platform, working with advisor and the likes. But we'll touch on that soon. So let's jump into the exciting part that most people will probably want to know is cash flow. And cash flow is king. What do we do and how do we start generating cash, and why do we need to think about that early on? As I mentioned before, any questions or any thoughts, do put in the chat. As a bootstrap company, of course, depending on where you are, you might be sitting on a huge pile of cash somewhere, or you might be thinking about, I do have some money, but how can I attract more money towards my startup? Of course, I don't work in financing or accountancy or anything. I'm just giving you some tips and advice based on my work and everything that I've researched. But please, as I always say, when it comes to law and money, make sure you speak to the right person so that you are actually on the right side of the law as well. In terms of funding seed money, definitely will recommend that you look at government grants. And I know someone contacted me via email to ask me to share with them some grants, but I'm not in a position of actually giving you the list of all the grants in all of the industries. But I will say that do please go out, look at especially organization FSB, if you are in the UK, the Federation of Small Businesses. They did help me when I first started my business in terms of helping me to find places where I can go for grants. So if you approach local council in your cities, they can be the good place to start to find out more about going for grants. Innovate UK, again, in the UK, doesn't need any introduction. We all know about that, but it's highly, highly competitive. Is it worth approaching it? I would say yes, because it helps you, the kind of question that they ask helps you to think really deeply about your startup and could actually help you have a clearer business plan. But as long as you know that depending on some of the fundings and grants that they provide, they might ask you maybe to have half of the money or 10% of the money already in your account or other criteria. And of course, the fact that it's very competitive might affect you. I don't say not to look into them for a source of funding, but anything you can look at will help. And as one of the things I wanted to do in this podcast was really to encourage people to think a bit more creatively. One of the things that works really well, in my opinion, is Kickstarter or crowdfunding. Right. Now, that's an interesting one because when Kickstarter and crowdfunding started, it was much easier to get funding than now because, again, oversaturation. But I still believe it's a great way to go when it comes to funding, and for a few reasons. For those who don't know, platforms like Kickstarters or crowdfundings allow you to go and create a page where you are fundraising for your ideas. Just like those who fundraise, maybe if I'm doing a half marathon and you want to give money to charity, there are platforms that do that. But Kickstarters and crowdfunding are the top platform that's where you can do that for your business. The reason why I say that it's a bit difficult to get money now is because the more people on the platform, and now because they're well known and everybody recommend that we go there, I'm not helping, means that more people are going there and it's harder to get known. But how can you use Kickstarter and crowdfunding as a way of pushing yourself a little bit? Well, the first thing you want to do, once you have your Kickstarter and crowdfunding page, don't just create them and expect the world to discover them. This goes back to one of the talks I gave at the conference in Cornwall. If I build it, they will come, I think. Anything business related, whenever you've created something, you have to promote it. And I've seen a lot of clients that will say, oh, I've created a page on Kickstarter or crowdfunding. It didn't work. They didn't have any marketing, or they didn't have a strategy on how to push that forward. And I think if you are considering that route, do think about how do we market that and use that as content for our own social media that will help us to grow our brand, and also to kind of let the word goes out about what we are doing. Again, having backers from crowdfunding and Kickstarters is a great way of having supporters, and also people getting to know you, and also having funding for your own startup. The reason why I mentioned Kickstarter and crowdfunding is because I think it's also a good way to help you with a different aspect of funding, which is the family and friends round. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the family and friend round in the comments section. It's something that people talk about that as the first step to getting funding, even before angel investors, to help you validate your ideas and move you forward. The downside with the family and friends round depends on your background, on the size of your network, and on many other things. Should we just throw it out with as something that might not promote equality or the likes? Well, you can debate as much as you want. At the end of the day, there's still an expectation that the family and friend round will help you move forward. So how can you, especially if you believe that you might not have a strong network to help you when you start building your company, I would suggest that you merge the Kickstarter and the crowdfunding, or you have a plan where you kind of do them side by side. Why? Well, when you look at the friends and family round, sometimes we limit ourselves to look at just the people we know, the friends that we know, but think about how can they be your promoter to push you in their networks. Your network might be small, might not have as many people that have the spare cash to promote you, but they might know other people. So especially if marketing is not your thing, or maybe you don't really like talking about your products, especially at the early day, I believe that being a founder is a journey, and we get better at asking for things as the inspiration comes. I know that from experience. But if you are not comfortable, then the crowdfunding or the Kickstarter will be a nice way. Just as you would have done if you are running a half marathon, you send a link to family and friends. You will encourage them to send the link to their bosses, the companies, or wherever they work. The same thing happens with the crowdfunding. It's actually a nicer and softer way for people who know that they have contacts. They might not be very close to them, but wants to use their contacts to get further contacts for funding, or just invite them into the crowdfunding round. So that's why I believe that when you think about putting together your family and friends round, think about how you can use other platforms and other tools to make that a little bit easier for you in the long run. And of course, the last one I will talk about in terms of generating money from others will be angel investing, which everybody know about that. Do make sure that you're at least connected with angel investors in your network. If you're not sure how, go to pitch clubs, go to startup competitions events. Usually it sounds daunting, but I believe that especially startup competition, there will be a lot of angel investors around. You can start approaching them. It's all about building relationships. Even if you are not at a stage where you're ready to raise, or you don't need to raise for whatever reason, always think about building relationship as early as possible. We're in a world where business is done between people rather than just putting your ideas out there and you just kind of disappear. So that's really important to look into that. So the second things the second area I'm going to look at now is how to keep the cost low in your startup as you grow. You can attract as much money as you can, but to at least to make sure that you extend your runway, how long the cash will last, you need to get better at three things: negotiation, skill swapping, and scavenger hunt. That's what I call that. Negotiation is kind of obvious and easy. But it's something that we don't do very, very often. In fact, whenever you want to start using tools, subscription, is there a way to negotiate with the suppliers. And I think the better you get at negotiating, even if it's just to pay for a license for certain things, the easier it will be at the beginning, especially when you don't have enough cash. This is something that most people don't do, and something that some organizations don't promote. Sometimes they have discounted rates for startups, but you don't really know that until you ask. So that's why I always say it's better to ask. Skill swapping is another thing that works really well. And skill swapping is not just with contractors, it can also be with other organizations, right? So it's pretty much, if there is something that I can do, as I've seen that done a lot, is there something that I can get in return? So for example, if you are really good at social media and marketing, and you have someone else that might be good, maybe they're doing a business based on products, is there a way that you can help each other create packaging for product for one person, and the other will get some tips, some help on the marketing? The last one is scavenger hunt. And that one is especially if you really want to keep costs low. One of the great examples I've seen it was actually with, I believe it was Nikki Davis that I interviewed for this podcast in preparation for the talk that I had on at the Startup Cornwall conference. If I build it, they will come, I think. And one of the stories she shared was when she was, her company startup she was working for, they were looking for office space, and it's really expensive, of course, office space, especially in London. What they decided to do was to go into a building that was completely being renovated and ask for very cheap office space, so that as they are renovated, they were happy to stay with the noise, with the discomfort of renovation, and also move around based on which floor or where they were working, which meant that for a few months, they were able to bring the team together, do what they needed to do to grow, and get some revenue before moving on to the next stage of their startup. My other favorite one is hidden costs, especially when it comes to tools. That's something that we don't really think a lot about, right? When we start looking at how much we're spending, sometimes we keep our eyes off the ball when it comes to expenses related to travel and to tools and subscription. So it's really important that whenever you want to take on a new tool, especially, if you have money at the beginning, it's exciting to sign up for everything. But if the idea is to grow bootstrapped, then every little penny that you can you can avoid spending or spend on something that's important, really counts. And when it comes to tools, there are a lot of platforms out there where you can get tools for free. I will highly recommend you go for AppSumo. Check out what tools they have out there. It's not technically free, but you have a chance of paying for a lifetime deal on certain platform. So for example, rather than me paying for Calendly, I got all the features of a platform called MeetFox, because MeetFox as a startup advertised in Calendly, advertised on the AppSumo, and we paid some money, I don't know what it was, $70 or something like that, for the lifetime license, which means that as MeetFox is getting better, I'm not spending more money year on year. And in fact, this also leads to another way of generating money. If you already have some platforms and you want to start getting users, then going to the likes of AppSumo and places where you can maybe discount for a limited period of time. It doesn't have to be lifetime licenses. You can have maybe 1 year for free, which also I had a platform where I used it for 1 year for free, and then I started paying a license to that. So those are other ways of using platforms. Be mindful of the hidden costs. It's because a lot of people will come in and think about selling platforms to you and you want to start using them. But if you don't think about what is the price as my team start growing, that can hurt you in the future. How easy it is for me to migrate from one platform to the next, that could also affect you. And there's also the fact of integration and how am I going to use the data in the future. If you use too many tools because it's cheap, but it means that they don't integrate really well, then that could be a problem for the future. So as long as you are aware of it, because again, as I've said at the beginning, you do what you can with what you have, but having that in the back of your mind can help you to see where you are moving on in the future. So the next topic we're going to look at is the product development. And again, I wanted to use this session to share some tips on how you can grow your product bootstrapped to the point where you start generating revenue so that it either puts you in a good place for traction when you're going to go and find VC's investment in the future, or maybe bypass that step altogether. When it comes to product development, I really want people to start thinking about asking one question as early as possible. Whichever you are doing, what is the little bit that I can do to validate the next stage or to make revenue? One thing that I see a lot when I work with startups, especially those who might not come from a technical background, is that the expectation of what the platform will look like when it's complete doesn't match the cash that you have in the balance. And when I work with technical founders, although they are aware of that because of the challenges of building a platform, there's still this idea of, oh, maybe if I build and I make it look like the best platform, it's going to be great. When I go out there and I attract clients, it means that we will have more clients, we will sell much easier, and the likes. And unfortunately, that's not exactly true. One of the things that I highly recommend people to do is to really think about, as early as possible, start talking to others about your platform and start thinking about different ways of generating revenues. Rule number one, if you can, even at the very, very early stage, if you can maybe have some kind of consultancy or manual service to start, go for that. Sometimes, especially when you're entering the world of startups, we want to have beautiful graphics and a platform because we know people want that. But if you swap it around and ask yourself, is there anything that I can do manually now whilst I am building the platform? Then it's a way of generating revenue. It doesn't mean that the entire idea can be done manually, but maybe just a part of that. That will help you to validate your ideas, get close to your clients, and also understand the challenges of even just marketing and sales and so many other parameters. Of course, don't focus on that you completely forget about the vision. Your vision is clear. You want to build a tech platform, and you still need to do that. So you could have on one side maybe just a prototype. It doesn't have, or just designs or what the platform will look at, so that you can still go and start talking and growing a team from the technical side that way, attract investments. But if there's part of your platform that you can do, that's why not do that? And for those who want to find out a bit more about that topic, then in a few weeks, I'm running a workshop, a interactive workshop, about 2 hours on If I Build It, They Will Come. I think it's based on the topic I gave at Startup Cornwall, but this time around, it's going to be more of a workshop format where there is a case study of building a business for an app called Alexandria, and I can share with you step by step, working together in groups, what are some of the strategy where you can really break the product development in a way that helps you to think about the little parts where you can start looking at bringing revenue. And in fact, one other thing worth mentioning, when we start looking at doing things manually, it also means using some aspect of automation. Here is where low code comes in a little bit, but be mindful of that. If your main or your first few questions is on low code first, you might end up going and learn low code. Once you are comfortable with it, build a platform with low code. Once you're comfortable with it, you start selling. The goal is always to talk about your platform as early as possible. Try and do what you can do to start generating revenue, even if it is by working with 1 or 2 clients, whilst on the side, you are investing the time of removing yourself or removing your team members from the equation and putting more automation to then reuse your team members in other aspects of your business to scale forward. So that's why I highly recommend, although the vision needs to stay clear, because you know your business more than me. And again, depending on what you're building, some aspect of that will be easier, some aspect won't be easy. Some aspect of that will still require some element of basic development, whether it's no code or not. But having that question will help you and your team really focus on the fact that generating revenue is really at the forefront of your mind in terms of extending your runway as much as possible. So how do you use this aspect of product development to help you to grow? Well, pre-ordering can also be a way of moving forward. So that if you are building something, and especially you know that even for some of the basic functions, we want to get some revenue, then is there a way where you can have some pre-orders? So that will work similarly to crowdfunding, but for this time around, you are not just getting backers, but you are getting clients that will be using your platform once it's launched. So that's, even just having a landing page can help with that. A few demos of what you already have of your concept, that can help with that. Remember, even if you are going down the line of landing pages, you still need to keep on promoting what you have. It's not just a question of creating a page, putting out there, but the more you go towards your target market in forums, in online advertising, all of that can really help. And in fact, I always promote more what kind of helps you get closer to your clients than advertising, because the early stage you are, advertisement can work. The added benefit of going directly to your client is that you get to validate by asking them questions that they might not have thought about. Before. And the other thing to mention is looking at industry leaders. This is something I'm seeing a lot more now, that especially, I don't know if the pandemic influenced this, but definitely there's a huge digital transformation that even larger organizations are recognizing the force of bringing innovation in their own organization. Either they do that by pairing up with startups. So for example, IBM will have a startup programs to help startups that will create something or innovate in their fields. Health sectors do that quite a lot as well. It's worth looking into your own sectors and the large companies, which one of them might have some kind of accelerator programs or some kind of funding that they want to invest in startups. And in fact, I am currently working with a startup. I'm their fractional chief product officer. And one of the negotiation as part of building the platform, we are partnering up with a large organization that is interested in helping us by supporting the growth of our platform to some extent, of course, but at least it will be a really great start that will boost us in addition to other investments to be able to build a platform. So that's something that's worth looking into. And again, as I've said, there is no one size fits all and there's no magic bullets, but if it's something that you might not have thought about before, it's worth looking into that. One other thing to mention is piloting, right? Piloting and how do you convert a pilot? I've seen a lot of startups that have great products, whether they were bootstrapped or had initial family round, crowdfunding, angel investors, or the likes. They finally get to the point where they have a platform and they start a pilot, but there is no strategies on how do I convert this pilot into this pilot customer, especially if they're doing that for free, into to paid customers. So that's why it's really important that even if you are really excited about working with a company, think a bit about the customer experience. And I know you will say, as many of my clients say, I have no time, which is true. I mean, if you are a small company or a small startups, there are just so many things to learn. But by the time you get to piloting your idea with a client, first it's a recognition that your idea is finally taking roots and people really want it. So it's really important to dedicate some time to really think about the customer experience to make sure that you turn those clients into paid customers. Even if it's just an app where your model is based on subscriptions and you're giving subscription for free, what is it that will entice them to move into paid clients? And secondly, if you are going to pilot, especially from a subscription app model, how are you tracking the features that people are using the most compared to the feature that you might put in your platform that is not being used? So it's really about looking at your pilot into one, a learning exercise to make sure that you're making the best part of your platform stronger and stronger, maybe adding to that so that you can generate revenues for people who wants to continue using the platform, but there are some features that they love. You add a bit more on top of that and says, hey, if you want to go that extra further, where I already know you love this, but that extra further, you pay some money into that. So that's another way of looking into pilots. And for those who have seen my newsletters and a lot of the things I talk about online, I generally believe that pilots are also another opportunity, just as I said before, to let the world know that you exist. If people don't know that you exist, it doesn't matter if you have the best platform. The amount of time you spend in your room in isolation to create a platform, by the time you finish, if you haven't really started teasing, then you'll start your marketing effort from zero. As I've mentioned before, when it comes to crowdfunding, then converting into a pilot will also help you to think differently about how do you move things forward. And again, I've spoken a lot about the product development. For anyone who's interested, please do remember that we run one-to-one free product and tech sessions at the end of every month. For this month, we're not doing it the last week of this month because next week I will be speaking at a conference. I'm a keynote in New York, so I won't be able to run the session. So we move them forward, but we're definitely going to have another one in October. And for anyone who wants to have a chat in between, you know where I am. I want to touch a little bit about marketing. And again, just to sum up before we move on to the people in the workplace playground, I believe that marketing is just such an important part, of the platforms. And of course, if anyone has any comments or if there's any kind of messages, please do let me know. We're happy to see that on the screen. We're also getting some comments and messages from others. There's someone that had to go. Thank you so much. Very insightful stuff. I need to jump off now and hopefully you can catch the rest later. No problems, Aaron. So the reason why I mentioned marketing is because first I have a confession to make. I really, really do not like marketing and I struggle with it. My background is in software engineering. And when I first started my business, I didn't even have an Instagram account. That just shows how much I didn't like marketing. And I've learned over the years to get better and better at it, marketing, business development. But it took some time for me to get into that. And of course, I had the lovely support of my team that really pushed me and gave me, a slap on the backside where I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this. But you have to do that. It's really important to grow your business to have a change of mindset. And especially, how do we let the world know? It comes with its challenges. And as I said, first, comfort zone problem. And secondly, budget. If I'm bootstrapping, which I had to do for my business, I had to be very creative in the way I create, I do my business development and my marketing. Limited budget for advertising, limited budget for so many things. So this is why I always encourage my clients, especially when you are at an early stage, really think about what is the minimum effort you can do to kind of to market your product and yourself. First, remember that when we do business, whether you have an app, whether you are a B2B rather than B2C, you are still selling or offering your solutions to humans. They need to know that you exist. Some people are not very keen with this idea of building a personal brand. But however you want to call it, if you do not exist and people don't know who you are, what work you do and why you are doing something, how do they connect to the emotional part of the decision-making process, right? That is why I encourage people to just build in public. And this is a topic that I've spoken a lot about. And it's, again, if you wanted to, you check my podcast. I did interviews on that particular topic, build in public. And I think it was one of the interviews with Chris Jones. So look into that as well, because I think that one was also another great session that can help you with this idea of generating revenues. So how can you build in public? It's very simple. If, like me, again, this is a strategy that I use, if, like me, you are not keen on social media, or you don't even know where to start really small. You don't have to post every day, but use your learning and your journey into something that you can share with others. I sometimes send a few questions to startups I work with about their businesses, the inspiration that they started, and so many other things. And just answering to those questions give you the seed of something to post, especially if you are at the very beginning and you don't really know many people and you're worried about what you are doing. It's really to help you, one, to start letting the world know that you are coming. Two, if people find you through a crowdfunding or whatever you're doing, they come on your page. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. It will matter even more if there's nothing that they can see about what you're doing. And three, you are building the marketing and those muscles that if you are not from that field, you might not have naturally. So it's helping you be uncomfortable really early so that it can help you move and you get better at that. Other aspect of marketing, storytelling. Storytelling always works. Even if you are telling a story of a mistake you've made when you've started, or a mistake or some of the challenges that you are going through, please do that as well. I've seen a wonderful video this week. Unfortunately, I can't remember on top of my head the name of the woman who put that video out there. It was a video about her. I think her product is in AI data science product to help hairdressers or people who want to, hairdressers to kind of provide the services to their clients so that they can see what hairstyle they might end up with, right? Something like that. And she's been doing a lot of work on that, and she's very passionate about it. Unfortunately, there was a deadline or a time when she was meant to launch. Things didn't go according to plan. And unlike what I've experienced with other tools that I've used myself, she created a nice video to show the journey of a startup, what they have to do, the challenges. And at the end, the acknowledgement that you were meant to have our product, our app in your hands, but we are going through certain unexpected challenges, which means that we are going to have a longer delay than planned. Just sharing that story is, great content and puts you on the map, because people who didn't know who you were will find out about you and will help you to grow your product. The last bit I'll say about the marketing is about finding your back door. When it comes to marketing and when you are on a small budget, think a bit about outside the box. What is it that others within your industry don't do? What are certain techniques that I can use to put my voice out there? Just as an example, for myself, I had to do a lot of different ways do a lot of different things to be noticed, from being an advisor at different startups accelerators to starting my podcast. And many people have wondered, well, your podcast, I do my podcast. I've been doing like every week for the last 2 years. It's been a passion of mine. At the beginning, it was the seed of a marketing strategy. How do people know I exist? But then I have realized that it helps me to connect with my audience and also to just enjoy every Wednesday, with everything that I go through as a business owner. I just love when Wednesday come along, as I get to meet some exciting people. And I know that maybe one person will hear this message and that will help their business or their lives, whatever it is. And for me, that is enough. I've used my podcast as a strong, powerful marketing tool by repurposing the content for very different social media, and also by using that whenever I apply to speak at conferences. Without, many people have come to me where I went to a conference. I think it was the first time I went to Madrid, South Summit in Madrid, and I said, "Oh, I would love to come and help." And they says, "Oh, by the way, we've seen that you have a podcast. Do you want to come and be our MC for the day?" So I ended up working for the last 2 years at the conference in Madrid, simply because they saw that I had a podcast. Even though I would have been happy with just one speaking slot, I end up with managing stage for 1 day or 2 days, depending on how much they need me. So this is why it's important to think differently about how you do your marketing. It can be something as simple as a newsletter. If you don't have the budget or the time to do that, then LinkedIn article makes it super easy. It's all about being able to let people know you at a more intimate level, and then having a strategy to reuse the same content, to reduce the amount of time you spend on marketing. I'm now in a point where I do my podcast and I disappear. My team will come, take what they want to do to then continue creating the content, which frees me up to do what I love. And that is work with the audience, we work with my clients and the likes. So it's really important to think outside of the box. Think about, a back door, because that back door will help you in the future. Now having done that for a couple of years, I've been invited to be director and entrepreneur in residence for Founder Institute, which is one of the biggest accelerator program in London, I'm excited by that. I will be working with Hotbed in London and various accelerator in Madrid, in London, and even starting to talk to people in San Francisco. So all of that from my house, because I started my business through the pandemic, and by using the tools that I could because I'm bootstrapping and of my marketing budget. So it's really think about what works well in your world and how you can move that forward and use that to help you grow. And thanks again to Nadine, who put a comment in the chat. Very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, thanks, Nadine, for your comments. Anybody who's have any question, even if it comes to you afterwards, then do find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer you directly or live. And more importantly, we do run the one-to-one free mentoring sessions to help you with your product development, your technical abilities, and anything else that you want. We're now going to look at just to kind of close off our podcast, we have two areas that we are going to look at quickly. They are very short, yet very, very impactful. The first one, people and workplace playground. Anyone who's heard me talk know how much I'm obsessed about the concept of creating a workplace playground. And it's not about play in the sense that you might think. Yes, I love to play, and I do make it a mission to bring play where I go. But the way I define play is not just about free food. Great, thank you very much, but you can give me as much free food as you want. You can give me a video game in the office, or I can have a nice room where I can have a nap. All of that are just icing on the cake. And if you really want people to play, it's by giving them the ability of doing their jobs within the boundaries, limitations, and challenges of the work. If you're going to work for a startup, we know it's going to come with challenges. But as founders or the leadership team, how do we make sure that people have the right processes, the right tool, and how do we create the culture for our startup? One of the things I see a lot that startups struggle with is not creating a culture. And the culture of a startup changes when you have 3 people to 5, 10, 20, and it keeps on growing further. If you are going to start bootstrap, it's still as important it's even more important to have people on your side to share their story. A lot of people who join bootstrap companies might negotiate some kind of equity. So they already have a stake. They want you to do well. So what are you doing to help them to grow? If, for example, you do not have the budget of hiring people full-time, that is not a problem. So many startups that I worked with, and even myself, I've relied on a lot of contractors to help me to grow. Even if I'm bringing contractors for one piece of the work or the next, especially when they work in the same area, I make sure that I create a way of them to really feel like they are part of the team. I know, now you might think, oh, well, that's a contractor, just gun for hire. They might want to work with you one day and they have other clients the other day. It actually doesn't matter, because what I want is for them, when it's their hour or their day where they're focusing on Athena leaders, to have that passion and knowing that I'm doing that. Yes, I'm getting paid, but I also really want to work on this type of work. And I love the energy that comes with the founders, that would be Naily, or the rest of the team. So that's really important to learn how to create as soon as possible. If you are struggling to find people for your organization, look at government support. This is something that, again, by networking, especially in the local community, asking your council or your committees, if you're in the UK, I don't know what that would be in other countries, but looking at government support, because sometimes they make it easier when it comes to apprenticeship and internship to link them with organizations. It really depends on the stage of your startups, but it's worth asking because you never know. There are also other volunteering platforms. One that I know some friends of mine have used is called Skilled Up. And that's another great platform for you to be able to join the platform where you pay a monthly fee. They help you with onboarding members of your team. But what they want is some people that would work with you as part of a kind of an internship model, so that the people that come to the platform look for internships, get some skills that will help them in their life in the future, or who knows, you might want to start and continue working with them as well. So that's why it's really important to also look at those platforms, especially for depending on what work you want done. If you have this opportunity of investing on someone, again, nothing comes for free. You can either go out and find someone, as a marketing person that have all the skill sets, or maybe a junior social media manager that might have some gaps in her skill set or their skill set, but you need to invest a bit in upskilling them. In return, you are paying less because you have joined a scheme or a platform. Then, depending on what you do, that could be something that you look for. And it's very important to also having a clear strategy, because it's nice to go and get as many people as you want to help. If you don't have a strategy, it's not going to work. It's great to go out and find as many AI tools that will generate content and will do this for you. If you don't have a strategy that might not work. And that's where advisors come on board. They can help you even if you have an advisor twice a month, or once a month, or once every week, to help you with creating the strategy. So that keeps the cost low in terms of the expertise you're paying for. And then you can get other people that a little bit more junior to execute the strategy. And as your budget goes up, then you can fill the in-between until you have the strongest team. So it's really important that to use very different strategies, because even if you start generating revenue, you want to be able to grow the people and grow your team, able to eventually start delegating so that you have the mind space to keep on pushing further. And if you're already at a place where you have great money in terms of revenue, then how do you make sure that you continue nurturing your people to move forward? And we have another comment from Nadine. What would you advise for new founders of AI companies like accelerator or incubators? I'm a female founder based in Leeds and would love to connect with experts in this field to help shape my AI. Well, that's a great question. In fact, Nadine, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I can look into my contacts and find people that are in this field that you can have a discussion straight away. And I think, especially if you are working with AI companies, there's a lot of I always recommend going to meetup events. Look at there are some accelerator programs actually that focus only on AI, and because this obviously AI is a buzzword, but at the same time there's a massive recognition of the power that AI is bringing to the market. So there are some investors that really wants to invest into new AI ideas. So it's really about going there and finding those accelerators, finding the network. And another tip, ask people on LinkedIn. Let's say you go to an accelerator, you might not get in. Connect with some of the people who run the accelerators. Connect with some of the founders who will go to the accelerators. Once you've connected, ask for a coffee. You're not selling anything to them, right? Ask them for a coffee and ask them for some advice and some contacts that will help you move forward. We're going back to the people aspect, but not from the team, but how do we use people to move you forward? This is a strategy that I've used myself whenever I'm learning a new skill, or when I'm looking for contacts to take me to another place. So especially when I really wanted to work at the core of the London accelerators, and I really wanted to get into the biggest accelerators, I just went to people who've been to those accelerators and said, hey, how do I get in? Funny enough, especially in the startup ecosystem, what I love, whether it's a startup ecosystem or just people with an entrepreneurship mind, we all remember the pains of starting and we are ready to help. So even if you approach 5 people, I can guarantee that at least 2 will want to have a coffee with you, and a discussion will really help you to move forward. But as I said, please do connect with me on LinkedIn, put a message and a reminder. And if you don't hear from me in a week, just ping me again, because, as I've said, I'm going to New York soon and it's going to be very busy. But I know some great people I can at least connect you with in the AI data science world that can help you to get to the next step. And to finish off on the leadership and the people aspects, I will highly recommend the transparency. This is something that I've mentioned before. Bootstrapping is not a clean slate or a permission not to pay people. But having said that, we know there's going to be time where budget is tight and you are probably staying up at night, not knowing whether you are going to make payroll or not. By being transparent and the way you lay the communication with others, whether they are contractors or they are part of your team, it doesn't matter. Transparency and creating this human bond will really help you to move forward. If it's payroll delay by X number of days or the likes, yes, it will affect other people. But the earlier someone knows, the more they can do something about it, the more the team might want to help, and more importantly, they are still on the journey, and you will maintain a healthier relationship with them rather than not telling them. Okay. And to finish off very quickly, just some of my top tips on getting VCs to love you. So as I've mentioned throughout this podcast, it's been a whirlwind of a journey for different strategies, especially things that I love to think are a bit more outside of the box, to help people think differently when it comes to growing their businesses, from getting early funding, building your platform in a way that let people know and attract clients, reducing your cost, and looking at tools. And I love tools and workflows, so I had to have that in there. But if you are going to go down the VC route, or if it's still on the card, and I like to believe that even though if you are not doing that, keep an eye out and still build relationships. My rule number one is build relationships in sectors where you are going, even before you go there. That can mean in terms of clients, in terms of funding, in terms of VCs and the likes. Know and understand what's happening, even if you might not need the money. Do you connect with others by a human connection rather than just by saying, hey, I've got the best platform? If you don't have a relationship with them, it's even difficult to get in. Is there anyone that can give you introduction? Warm introduction are the best, which is why I always highly recommend joining pitch clubs, getting to know people that could one day, help you and help you to get into that world. But one of the things I really wanted to mention here, as we're getting towards the end of this episode, and I don't want to drag on for long, is traction. I believe that especially if you are starting by being bootstrapped, having some kind of traction will help you to help you with a better valuation and help you with better terms when you enter in negotiation with VC. As a minimum, can you generate a 10K monthly recurring revenue? That's great. Go ahead and start saying what you get. But the more you can generate, the better it's going to be for you. So if you really want to start working with VCs, do think about what kind of VCs do I want? What is it that I want for my company, and how much traction that I've already have, so that I can go there and set myself apart differently. Of course, everything else that you've heard, pitch planning, storytelling, and having a great funnel will also help. But for me, the one parting advice that I have is really to think about, regardless of the stage you are in, if there's a way, however minimal, you can show some kind of traction when you go into VCs, please do so. Angel investors, you might get away with not having at least financial traction, but when it comes to VCs, I believe that it will really position yourself differently. And this was all I had for you for this wonderful episode. And thanks again to Leeds Digital Festival for having me on board. And thank you for having this great audience. If you have any questions, do please come and get in touch. I'll be happy to answer you live or one-to-one on LinkedIn, or whichever platform you choose to connect with me. We have a one-to-one free mentoring sessions at the end of every month. Do make use of that, as I've met a lot of startups. And who knows, I might even meet you at some of the largest accelerator programs where I'm also an advisor and mentor. In the meantime, though, do remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.